I was definitely the odd one. Thank you. The Japanese guy who also knew the Thai language flagged down a cab once we got from Fort Devens to Thailand and got us to our, wait a second. Oops, wrong paragraph, sorry. Okay, okay, each of us had a very small suitcase, and we had had to get special recorders and special receivers that were really hard to get. And we added 2 guys to the team. And the Japanese guy knew the Thai language, so he was able to flag down a cab when we got to Thailand. And real quickly, once we got out of the airport, we decided we were not going to be doing any playing around in Bangkok. It was smelly and it was really dirty. So we didn't. We were not real happy about that. I talked with several experts in country for about 5 days. And we worked at the hotel and we wrote up our ideas, and every day they talked about them. And we were trying to figure out how to avoid choke points along the border and through them. So we identified fallback positions. If you find yourself here and you need this kind of help, here's how you do it. Everyone would talk about the areas where they had special knowledge, and there were lots of areas where we had no knowledge. This was a time when there was very, very little travel between the United States and China. And so I think I was traveling on a Canadian passport at that time, but I'm not sure. I can't remember which one. It might have been British, but more likely Canadian. I don't sound very British, really. Let's see. Anyway, we spent 5 days sitting around this hotel room in Thailand and talking, trying to figure out what we were going to do if we had a problem. And there were lots of potential problems since this was China was the bamboo curtain was very real, very real. And the Chinese occasionally would make people disappear fairly regularly, actually. So basically, this is what we were going to need, and we discussed it, and we had to go from Thailand to China, and from China to North Korea, and we had to stop at about half a dozen places in China along the way that we thought might be of interest to monitor the local electromagnetic spectrum. We traveled mostly by train. We did not get off our train car for the intermittent surveillance. Actually, we did our work in the bathroom or the toilet on the train car because the trains were very full and very crowded, and the toilet was also very, very smelly. So in theory, we had purchased first class tickets, but not so nice. I was able to go into the bathroom, straddle a bomb site hole. I did the electronic recording. The bathrooms were really terribly smelly and dirty. In the cabin, we did not try to stretch out to go to sleep. There were four of us, but didn't work. So we took turns sleeping in our seats. Everyone knew better than to think your hands got clean when you washed them. The water was did not look very clean, and we had local stuff. We had some local stuff for diarrhea, which was very good and helpful. Locally, locals had a pretty good idea of what we were going to need. The Thai handler helped us get across the Chinese border and into China, onto a Chinese train. And we had the Korean local help us get the Chinese, got off the Chinese train and walked to the border in North Korean chain. And this was probably the most dangerous thing we did. There'd been a number of people who tried, the CIA tried to get into China that had simply crossed the border and disappeared. But there were three of us, or four of us who were crazy, so they didn't care. Let's see, we got off, crossed into China, and in Thailand, and a lot of people lived in mainland China, and so we worked in Hong Kong. So the border was less restrictive than Thai and Korean borders had been. Oh, that's I think a couple pages disappeared. Yeah, yeah.
You need to tell them a little bit about running around North Korea on the train.
Well, first we ran around China.
Right. So,
Yeah, I mean, basically, the routine was somebody was watching the recorders or watching the transceivers continuously, and we were turn on the recorders and record what we saw and record where. So it's where, when. Anyway, we spent what, couple days in China, then we crossed into North Korea.
So basically, you described it to me. You ran around North Korea on the train with the tape recorders going.
Yeah, except we didn't keep them going all the time.
Standing over the
the
hole.
hole in the toilet. Which I think David may remember what those trains are like.
And then to get out, you went back sort of the way you came,
Yeah.
except you went down to Hong Kong instead of
Yeah,
to
we
Thailand.
went ahead and we crossed back in Hong Kong.
And
Yeah.
then you
Yeah.
when you got to Hong Kong, you headed home as quick as possible. right?
Yeah, yeah. We all had diarrhea. lots of interesting issues. And then about, I got a message from Vint Hill Farms, and they wanted more surveillance in some places. So they'd obviously done something wrong because they wanted more. And so he had to go back again, and they decided they wanted us in some places, most of which were not feasible. But we basically followed the same route, and the fellow who spoke Japanese was replaced because he was on the set of the John Wayne movie. What was it? I can't remember the name of the darn movie, but it was. He needed a whole bunch of them, a bunch of Oriental guys for this movie about Vietnam. So, okay, so our mission to surveil the Chinese coastline. We took commercial transcontinental flights out of Hong Kong, and the food was much better on the commercial airlines. We spent 4 or 5 days in Hong Kong before taking a bus to the airport. From the airport to the frontier, we got a few good meals, and we wanted to buy clothes, so people could buy. I actually bought a suit, which I worn a few times, and then I outgrew. The Chinese state controlled all the aircraft so that we couldn't take any internal flights between spots around China. And we didn't want to be anywhere near Beijing and work for the state. So we had some problems, or we would have had problems. So they controlled all the aircraft in China, and so basically we rode around on the trains and collected data from inside the bathrooms, which was not very glamorous, and but it made up for that by being extraordinarily dangerous. It was really dangerous stuff. So we went back to the US, and I drove Vint Hill Farms back up to Fort Devens, and then up to oh, I see what happened, Nancy. Oh, well. We'll just forget it. Move
Leonard, can
on.
I ask you what year this was that you were doing this?
This was 1968.
Oh. So the Cultural Revolution was going on in China, wasn't it?
Yes, and I saw a lot of people chewing on the bark of trees. I mean, it was not a nice place. And actually, Nancy and I were in the northern part of China, oh, I don't know, 5-10 years ago. And we were talking to a professor of probability in eastern China. And he asked what I thought. I said, well, you know, China's in much better shape now than it was when I was here. I said, you know, you guys are doing a good job and all this stuff. After Nancy had embarrassed the hell out of me, saying I was a spy. It's just what you want.
the professor had invited us to lunch and to go.
Yes, Richard, your cousin is not very clever.
To go to lunch, he'd invited the head of
Oh,
the university guy that was head of the Communist Party to go with us. So in front of the head of the Communist Party, I said, you know, when they said, have you ever been to China? I said, I haven't, but my husband was there. And he was in 68, you know, he was. Anyway, Leonard got out of it very gracefully, but that's a different story. That's a Vietnam story, not part of this story. So, but you can tell whatever you want to tell.
Yeah, anyway,
Um,
after Nancy embarrassed the hell out of me in front of the head of the Communist Party in Northeast China, I was able to slip out. They let me go.
I'm glad. We're all glad.
They didn't want to keep me around. I did get back to the States. I got the tapes to Fort Meade within 12 hours of having,
no, you haven't told that story yet.
well, okay, so
But the second part of the second story here, I've got.
Nancy, you got a staff to stay sitting in front of the microphone.
The second part of the story is about, the second story in this piece has to do with his trip to the Kamchatka
Speak up.
Peninsula. And so I'm going to go make sure he has the right piece of paper in front of him, but the map of that area I've got on the screen here.
Anyway, I think, yeah, I think that's,
I'm going to start with these lines.
okay.
You're back to Fort.
Went
Back
back, I was back in Fort Devens and we drove the 450 miles or so from Fort Devens down to Vint Hill Farms with a buddy every couple of months in order to get orders in person to avoid screw ups. The general says, this is what I want accomplished. I would figure out what equipment and personnel would be needed, and we would negotiate these resources and time for each job. One assessment, we got one assignment we got for a trip to Vint Hill Farms was to learn about the communication system of a brand new Russian submarine to aircraft. So they had a brand new system, absolutely brand new. And we wanted to be able to know what sort of traffic was going on between the aircraft and the subs. So I would figure out what equipment and personnel we were going to be needing, and then I'd negotiate with the general staff about what sort of resources I was going to need. The new system was a major change in communications between the Russian subs and their airplanes, and Fort Meade really wanted to know what they were saying to each other. We didn't know much about the technology, and they were using, except we did know that it was still tube-based. My buddy and I set a place in Fort Devens to figure out how to accomplish this mission. The birdcage is a highly secure area where we could talk with a couple of electronic experts. Finally, we decided on a plan to get information to answer the general's questions about the new communication system, and we would get it directly from the Russian submarines based in and we would go and get it directly from the Russian submarines in Kamchatka. Kamchatka is home of the Russia's Pacific submarine fleet. Kamchatka is this is right across, it's just right across the Bering Sea from Alaska. And actually it's right across from Shimei, Alaska, which is the second from the last Aleutian island.
Hmm.
So if you, well, I won't, I'm still not good enough with this technology, so it's just the way it's going to go. But you may remember on September 1st, 1983, there was a Korean Airlines 747 that was shot down by the Russians over Kamchatka. And it was a coastal patrol aircraft shot down Korean Airlines Flight 007. Because of its location on the far eastern frontier of Russia and the former Soviet Union, Kamchatka has always been of immense strategic importance, and it's for this reason the peninsula was a closed region for many decades. Kamchatka is also the site of several Air Force bases, as well as the early warning radars that would detect an American attack on the motherland. Because of this, the American military devoted enormous resources to probing Kamchatka's air defense system. I had to order equipment from Fort Meade, and we would talk with a supply guy who worked for the general. We waited until we expected there to be good weather in Kamchatka. That's also where you can get minus 40 degrees, minus 60 degrees. It's a little chilly. When the time was right, we drove from Fort Devens to Fort Meade to get two special recorders that would handle the high frequency signals from submarines, wideband to get all sidebands that were transmitted, and hydrophones and charts. We flew Boston to Tokyo, then Tokyo to Sapporo on the Japanese island. We took a big taxi that would hold all our gear to the Japanese Navy harbor where the subs were. Hokkaido is a large island with room for a large city, Sapporo, a major military base, and a major downlink for American satellites. We spent a few days in a hotel in Sapporo while getting the equipment installed. We did not stay at the Japanese military base. They had a very convoluted security apparatus, and if I wanted to go drinking, I wanted to go drinking, I did not want to have to fill out forms. So we basically, we spent a few days in a hotel in Sapporo getting the equipment installed. We did, there was a power issue for one of the recorders, and we were able to resolve it eventually. And we had to weld hydrophones to the sails of the sub and put cables through the sail, installed some critical stuff for recording up in the sail itself. So that was just, you know, the nuts and bolts of what we had to do, but we ate businessmen's meals, which were the precursor of modern sushi bars. The restaurants had a sloping glass shelf, so people would sit down at the glass shelf and you'd point at the various kinds of stuff that you wanted to try and eat, and you would make the stuff pretty quickly and sit there and drink beer and eat sushi. And the beer was actually very good. The Sapporo beer is a very good beer. The recipe was developed in Japan by a German brewmaster at about the turn of the 1900s.
It still is. When we go out Chinese eating, we often have a Sapporo beer.
Well, that was the first and probably the only line of Japanese I still remember. It's Oki Sapporo beer or Okudsai. Give me a large Sapporo beer, please. Or if I use the accent that I learned at Fort Devens, it's Oki Sapporo beer or Okudsai, which was the Southern American Southern accent over the Chinese, over the Japanese. It was didn't really work very well. So anyway, we ate the we spent, I guess, 4 or 5 days eating sushi and drinking beer. Diesel sub had been used to support Navy SEAL operations, which they used for putting them into North Korea. It was not an attack sub anymore. It had been downgraded, and they wanted to give us a low value equipment in case the mission failed and we lost it. When we were ready, we checked out of the hotel with everything that we had left and headed north in our submarine to Russians Petro Pavlov. I still can't pronounce that thing after 55 years. Anyway, it's the Russian sub base. It's about halfway up the inside of Kamchatka Peninsula, and that's where they were developing and testing this communication system. We traveled about halfway up, and which was about 700 miles, if I remember correctly. We thought we would have the best opportunity to hear a new Russian sub squawk if we were up the inside the bay where the subs were housed. A Russian sub came out to meet us. They were not aggressive because our boat was so old. They thought maybe they just put a few seals. We were just going to try and put a few seals ashore or something. So we maneuver around, got the recording equipment going, and hoped they would use their new system, but they didn't. So we headed straight for them and nudged them. That's a, in quotes, nudge. Then they squawked, and that was all we needed. Some of the contents would be obvious because we knew that they were talking about the silly Americans that just rammed them. You're trying to decipher communications. That's the sort of information you need to know. What's the topic? So we nudged them, and they squawked, and all of the contents would be office. So we wrote everything down that we could, and we sent the tapes off to Fort Meade. We duplicated the tapes with the recorder that we brought and called Fort Meade, actually communicated with Fort Meade. That was, we radioed Sapporo, and they patched us through to Fort Meade. We told them we had the tapes and gave them coordinates where they could come meet us to pick up the package. And it was clearly in international water. We wanted to make sure it was real clear. There was no no room for foul-ups in that regard, because we did not want to have a modern nuke boat, or at that time, a modern nuke boat come after us in this old rusty can. So we duplicated the tapes, and so anyway, okay, so at the same time, we were headed south towards Japan as fast as the boat would go, which was pretty slow. The Russian sub chased us for a little while. It was much faster. And we were, uh, but we didn't bother them anymore, so they lost interest. It took about 5 hours for us to get to the coordinates we'd given to Fort Meade for the rendezvous and for an aircraft. Basically, we reached the designated coordinates and we surfaced and launched a helium-filled balloon. It held the tape suspended from it. An old American patrol craft, I think a P2V, an old P2V flew by. It had a V-shaped catcher on the nose. And so they went off and did that, and off the tape went. I didn't care how they got the thing to Fort Meade. It was out of my hands. Somebody else had figured out what they wanted to do with it when we reached the, so the tape went off. Within 12 hours of collecting the information, the tapes had traveled by air to Fort Meade, Maryland, and Big Daddy had a copy of the tape and would start analyzing it. So our mission was accomplished. This was a major change in communication between the Russian subs and our airplanes, and Fort Meade thought it was important to know how they were communicating. We stayed on the surface and proceeded slowly back to Sapporo. Class A uniform on the Japanese Army coast, where we were staying in order to get a commercial plane to leave Japan. So the two of us had to basically we had to have Class A uniforms, or we couldn't fly. And I was not about to pay full fare. I said, no, I'm just,
Nice.
so I borrowed a couple we borrowed Class A uniforms. We got dressed up. We flew from Sapporo down to Tokyo. From Tokyo, we flew to we went all the way to Washington, D.C. There may have been a couple of stops in the meantime, but that was sort of the gist of it. I got my job done, and hopefully they had a good time. And that was what we did there. Any questions?
So Leonard, were your recordings, were they more just like bleeps or something, or were they voices or?
No, it was, they were chopping the voices, they were chopping the signals up into little tiny pieces
Uh-huh.
and scrambling them.
Oh, I see. So that's what you were recording, and then you could unscramble them when they got back to Fort Meade.
Yeah, that's what the analysts back at Fort Meade were working on. They worked on that for about 2 months before they finally got it figured out.
Interesting.
We talked to some of the analysts, and I said, well, knowing the Russians, they like to use simple ideas. So here's how they do it. And they said, no, it's got to be much more complicated than that. It wasn't. That's the way it is, this is, they were in it for the money.
No more complicated than just ramming a boat in order to get it to give you some noise.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, I can't believe they didn't like shoot you or something.
We tried.
There were a lot of people. Well, we're in the intelligence business, and the guy you shoot today may be the guy who's going to save your life tomorrow.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Yeah.
So you didn't go around pissing off the Pope. Just there's no reason to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was what we did, and
So they knew full well you were in this old sub doing intelligence work.
Nancy, there's nobody in the world that would take a World War II class submarine up into Kamchatka. Nobody would do that unless you were in the intelligence business, and took a lot of fuel too. So, but we did what we did, and it was kind of fun.
Who drove the sub? Did you have?
Well, they had Navy guys.
Oh,
There were
good.
Navy guys who actually knew how to run the submarine.
Oh, good. Oh, not like when you had to fly the B-52.
Exactly.
No.
They didn't teach you how to do it.
Teddy and Richard, they would have been the people to fly the B-52s, but this was a means to an end.
Mhm.
And the means was about 30 seconds of squawk time.
Wow. Wow.
So there was, it's just the two of us and a couple $100,000, even in those, it's 50 years ago.
Mhm.
People wanted to know what they could do.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for the installment. I need to take off, so I'm going to depart.
Okay, Chuck. Well, it's good of you to come by.
Good to see you all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And you guys are going to be down on the Daybab Peninsula next week, seeing Jenna, I understand. So that'll be cool.
That's part of the idea is to pester the hell out of two of the Dolan girls. See if they can still cook.
There we go.
I don't have any doubts about that.
Well,
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
okay. See you later, Chuck.
Bye.
Good to come by. Thank you, everybody.
I have one more question, Leonard. When you
Sure.
were on the train doing the recording, what I'm imagining is a microphone that you drop down on the wire through the hole. Is that right? Or you were just sitting in the
I
bathroom?
was looking, it was an antenna.
Oh, did it go down through the hole though? No,
It went up.
it went up. Oh,
I did actually, it had to go down.
Oh,
The only way you could,
it's always.
and no, I did not, I didn't salvage the antenna. The wire had to be, we
oh,
threw away the wire.
oh gosh. Oh,
Was
yeah.
used.
Oh, that's
Well,
interesting.
Well used.
Mhm.
But wouldn't the noise from the train over sound anything you were trying to record?
I was recording the electronics.
From the train itself?
No, I was trying to record when they turned on radars and what kind of radars they were and what frequency the radars were.
So the frequency was enough different from the sound that it didn't interfere.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What about the fact that a train is a metal box, did that
That's why I
impact?
had to run my antenna out the
Damn.
bottom
Okay.
and
Hmm.
see, but that's the Chinese trains, or both the Chinese and the Korean trains are very high clearance.
Hmm.
So there was lots of room underneath it for me to drag wires.
I see. Okay.
And that was part of what I wasn't trying to solve other problems. I was just trying to solve the problem specifically.
Hmm.
And we did.
And you said you didn't take recordings everywhere. You sort of started and stopped. So you had some kind of little map as to what.
Right. There were certain areas that the guys at the National Security Agency said, okay, we would like to know what's going on here. And we'd like to know some other place here. And we'd record for, 10 minutes, 5-10 minutes. This is when we were using a Phillips cassette tape.
I remember Phillips.
And so we could, that was back when Phillips cassette tapes were pretty cheap, although we were using much better tape than you normally use for audio. But it was, anyway, we had a good time. It was sort of a good time.
Sort of.
So
Can you
we're-
talk a bit, like when you were on the train, did you get a lot of looks, or, checking of your ticket, or like, what was it like?
I
to be
had 3 guys that were of Asian extraction,
Mm-hmm.
and one of them was actually Korean.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was he would tell people, this is a Canadian colleague and he's doing something very important to support the wonderful leaders
Mhm.
and all that sort of stuff. And I didn't have to. Hell, I was just recording what I had to do, and I did it.
Yeah.
Then I got it sent to Fort Meade, and eventually I dried out enough to get on a commercial flight and fly back to the East Coast, Fort Devens.
Mm-hmm.
Were there satellites at that time? Spy satellites?
No, Mary. When did the Russians launch Sputnik?
Well, I thought it was in the 50s. Was it the 60s?
This was the 60s.
Well, when was Sputnik? Well, shoot. Okay, so
Early 60s.
early 60s, I guess. I just remember having to do sit-ups at Forest Ridge because the Sputnik went up.
And you watched
We were
on the dot.
we were on a big race.
Well, it was we weren't getting silly. We were just all we were trying to do is keep track. I mean, today you would definitely use satellites.
Yeah.
You'd use satellites and you'd use all sorts of other stuff. So this is not current. This is not
Right, so this
current
is
security
pre all that.
information.
Yeah. I was just trying to figure out historically, but how things went.
I don't remember, Mary. I don't even remember when Sputnik was.
Well, I'm trying to think, we went to the moon in 69, didn't we?
Yeah, so
And so John F. Kennedy said we have 10 years to get to the moon, and that was out, it would have been 59. So it seemed to me that Sputnik was, oh, well, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
sorry, I just don't remember.
It doesn't matter.
1957.
57.
57.
Oh, 57.
Thank you,
Okay.
David.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
makes
thank you, David. You actually looked it up. We like to just guess and try to think.
Anyway, good to see you. I'm gonna think about, there were 2 or 3 more stories I might tell. I don't really want to talk about blood and guts and that sort of thing, and but there were a couple things about the McNamara line that was sort of interesting. And so we'll try to do some of that, maybe, but I'm gonna have to think about it for a while, and Nancy will have to see if she wants to keep helping me with the production.
I'm sure she will.
Yeah, yeah.
Please do.
But I guess that means we're gonna take a little hiatus here and
Nancy will get back to you. Let you
Great.
know if she's gonna do it. I just don't know.
but you think 2 weeks is too early, is what you're saying?
2 weeks is too early at this point, because I just need to. Wait, this is actually, I have to sort of. It takes a little bit of time to get my thinking together on this stuff. So what is the story that I actually want to say? And what would be of interest to people? There's no reason talking about, IPRF stuff and all the signal parameters that I knew about at the time. So anyway,
Well,
thank you, everybody. Is
happy
anything?
everybody's calm, and we,
Thank you, Leonard.
Very,
you.
very interesting.
Thank you. Yeah.
Oh,
thank you all. I will,
Okay.
there was good beer.
another question, I'll close off shop. I guess I should stop recording. Hang on.